Today, I'm kitbashing another Thousand Sons Rubric Marines squad, and I'm gonna use these guys over here, the Inner Circle Companions, as the base for this kitbash. And the theme of this squad is gonna be birds. The Avian theme, the Tzeentch, knowledge, wisdom, Thoth, you know, the Ibis god, that sort of stuff. But before I can do anything at all, I have to scrape off parts of the Dark Angel's icon, but not all of it, because I want to keep the wings. Because we're doing birds. Next up are the weapons, and I'm picking flamethrowers, of course. You know, you got either the bolter or the flamer for a rubric squad. And I feel like birds are more of a close combat weapon. Also, birds, they're closer connected to Tzeentch than the bolters, so flames make more sense. Either way, I'm going with the flamethrower, and I'm taking these from the Pyre Blasters, Pyro whatever, the flamethrower Marines, because they're the perfect size. The arms fit perfectly onto the body of these guys, but they are a bit boring. You know, they are Imperial flamers. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some of these actual Thousand Sun flamers and just snip off the head, snip off the front of this Imperial flamer, and glue them both together. And I got 3 regular Rubric Marines with flamers all done. Well, not all done. They need a lot of decorations, you know, birds, skulls, maybe living birds, crows. And I got some purity seals here and there that I'm definitely gonna scrape off. But, you know, so far so good. These guys, I think they're looking good. I, of course, used all of the backpacks that have the sort of bird heads. And even the helmets have a little bird head on there just to stick with the theme. There's only one thing, I think they're gonna stand out quite a lot next to my other rubrics. I mean, these are the regular rubric armor bodies, and yeah, they are a bit taller, but I think they'll fit. These, by the way, are my Tomb King rubrics. You can see that video already on the channel. But here's the thing, I got 3 regular guys with regular flamers, but I want to have some other weapon in there that I can point at and go, okay, that's the Soul Reaper cannon, in case I want to play these as bolter marines. So let's just make a massive heavy flamer. To start with, the mouth. And I'm basically going to do the same thing, but I'm going to use this sort of exhaust or whatever head from the Chaos Rhino kit. That's a good start. I mean, it's a lot bigger than the other one just by changing the head, but it's not enough. Every heavy Space Marine weapon is generally powered from their backpack. So I'm going to change his backpack. Instead of giving him the Thousand Sons backpack, I'm going to give him the one from the Eradicators. I just have to connect the two with some hosing and some pipes. But I first want to make this massive backpack from the Eradicators look more like a Thousand Sons backpack. So I'm just gonna snip off these 2 stabilizers. I replace them with the Thousand Sons backpack stabilizers. And then I just glue this Tzeentch icon from the Chaos Rhino on the back to finish it off. Now it looks a little bit more Tzeentch, a little bit more Thousand Sons, but still a little bit Imperial, which is fine with me. You know, these guys, they go out into the universe. That's at least the story of my Thousand Sons army. Every sorcerer, aspiring sorcerer or exalted sorcerer, grabs a couple of rubrics, goes out into the universe for whatever purpose they have. And they come back later to all come together to fight together against a common enemy. So they pick up bits and pieces of Imperial armor and Imperial weapons, and they just convert them, use them for themselves, corrupt them however they like. So I gave him a good thick hose, 2mm tin wire from Green Stuff World, and he too is ready to just go in the waiting room until I'm done with the Aspiring Sorcerer, and then everybody's gonna get their bird bits and decorations and feathers and God knows what. But the Aspiring Sorcerers in my army, they're gonna be elevated a little bit more to make them look less like Rubric Marines and a little bit more like Sorcerers. I want that to be a very, very clear difference between what is a Sorcerer who is alive and what are the Rubrics, which are basically automatons. So I'm gonna use lots of Exalted Sorcerer bits on this guy. And of course, anywhere I can, I pick bird motifs. There we go, all the bird pieces, all on him. He got a bird staff, a bird backpack, a bird helmet, and a bird shoulder pad. It's just all the Exalted Sorcerer bits, but I wanted to keep him still very much a rubric, so that's why I took this helmet and not one with mutations. My Exalted Sorcerers, they're gonna be mutated like hell. But the Aspiring Sorcerers, they're still kind of in the starting phase of their career. Let's put it like that. Now, what I also want to do is I want to make him cast a spell. Kind of like this guy over here from my Tomb King squad. You know, I finished this guy almost completely, and then I wanted to do a little bit of light effect on his hand, and I figured, you know, what would be cool? Make him actually cast a spell. So he's casting a sort of death head there, and it's purple because purple is the color of death magic in Warhammer Fantasy. I don't know if it's in 40k as well, but it works for fantasy. So this guy, I want him to cast a spell as well, but since we have the bird themed, Let's see if I can make him summon up or conjure up some kind of bird. So first there's this thing over here. There's this from the Chiric Acolytes. It's like a bird. It's a really big one, as you can see here on the sprue, with nasty feathers. It's a really Zinchian bird. That's a good option. Another one is Kretusa, the crones here. Yeah. She comes with a couple of crows like this that are sitting on a base. They're pretty static, they're sitting still. And then I got these from the Tomb Kings. This is like a, I don't know, skeleton vulture that is chained to the icon that they carry around. And I think he's going to be the best one because I actually forgot to make my icon on the guy with the heavy flamer. I'll do that later, but I think this is the best because then the small ones, the little crows, maybe I can make a sort of perch for the icon, put a bunch of little crows on there. And then the big one, that's actually the coolest one, that one I'm going to save for my Exalted Sorcerer that's also going to have the bird theme. So it's just going to be the skeleton bird. And I'll suspend the bird a little bit up like this, so it looks like he's casting a spell, sort of setting that bird free. It's a bit wonky right now, it's way too high, but that's because I'm going to paint it separately, of course. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to glue this all in place right now. So it's time for my icon, which I forgot. And I got these 3 crows here from Kretusa the Crones here, but they need a perch. They need somewhere to sit. So I'm just going to get this Eye of Horus icon from the regular Chaos Legionnaires. And I cut it up a little bit to make it less recognizable as an Eye of Horus, because we can't have that with 1000 Suns. And this way, there's a nice little ledge for the crows to sit on. I'm getting a little bit of a deja vu with last week's video. That was my Chaos Paladins. Kind of the same idea with the icon there. But let's see if I can get these 3 birds on here. And I already broke the legs of one of them because they all grip onto these stones with Kretusa the Crones here. And when I was trying to get this guy loose from his stones, well, his legs are gone. So I'm just gonna see if I can maybe get some green stuff and just, I don't know, put bird droppings on there, and that's where his paws are sinking into. I don't know. Yeah, nice. That works. I think it looks cool. A very unique icon. Time for a load of Grimdark bits and pieces. And I'm gonna start with this little thing. I hope I can show it off. That's a little bird skull that comes from the Skulls kit from Games Workshop. And I'm gonna use this to embellish that icon on their chest. Yeah, like that. And of course the sorcerer needs a little book on his hip and some dead animal bits on the other side. These are all pieces from Pete the Wargamer's kit, the dead animals bit kit. And it's just a bone, some sort of weird bird skull, and just little, I don't know, talismans or little trinkets that he uses to cast his spell. Because when I think of birds with magic, I kind of default to a sort of voodoo style of magic with charms, bones, I don't know, things like that. And of course, feathers. I got these plumes here, which I believe are from the old Empire Swordsman kit. Thank you to Daniel, my buddy, who sold me his massive bits box that had a lot of these in there. And I'm just gonna start sticking these onto shoulder pads and so on of my rubrics. Like that. Kinda like clipped wings. And I'm only doing this on my regular rubrics, not on the sorcerer, because he has ornate shoulder pads already. And I want to make that difference between the sorcerer and the rubrics even more clear. But I'm also going to glue a couple of these onto the guns and other places where there used to be some purity seals. Time for some battle damage, because I want to make my rubrics look like they've been through hell, and they are led by a sorcerer who doesn't really care for their aesthetic. I mean, for me, 1000 Suns, they're a little too sane in most of the Games Workshop lore. I want them to be more maniacal. They are already very egotistical and egocentric, and they will sacrifice anyone and anything, even each other, for a little bit of power or a little bit of secret knowledge. So I don't think they would treat their rubrics that well. They're like tools, you know, kind of like a fancy lawnmower. You have a lawnmower, yeah, you want to keep the engine running. You want to sharpen the blade regularly because that's what you need to cut the grass. But if it gets scratched and dented and a little bit of rust forms on the exterior, you're not going to immediately fix that up or replace it or... Yeah, can you imagine an extra lick of paint for a lawnmower? You don't do that with your tools. And the same goes for the cloth. I mean, I don't want them to wear this sort of fine silks and perfect linen or anything like that. So instead, I'm making it a little bit more coarse and a little bit more rough with some corrosion texture. This is kind of like typhus corrosion, has some texture in it. Just makes the cloth look a little bit more rough. But I'm also going to set them apart with the paint scheme. So I want to paint the regular rubrics as an African Ibis. That looks like that. So a black head, black legs, and it has a black tuft of tail feathers as well. Now these guys don't have a tail, so I'll just make the gun black. So they got black boots, a black helmet, and these bird heads that stick out of the backpack are also black. And I'm giving it a very basic Grimdark black paint scheme. First with some browns, some dark bluish grey stippled in, a quick dry brush with some Iron Warriors, and a highlight of silver, mainly on the gun and the face. Now I've picked out a few details, but I can't do too much because it would break the whole idea of a white body with a black head and black feet. So I just did some gold and I did some seraphim sepia on these pouches, and I'm gonna leave the feathers as they are now because I'm not 100% sure yet what I want to do with it. But I am going to add a little bit of grime already with a brown enamel wash. Now, of course, I reduced a lot because I want the armor to really look white. So the shoulder pads, they're nice and white, but I kept the cloth fairly dirty. But I'm gonna add a little bit of decrepit filth, which is an enamel from Villainy Inks, and it's kind of like bathroom mold. And I want to see if I can add it along the rim because, of course, that would get dirty. But it's also a way to kind of simulate those black tail feathers that you have on an ibis. Let's see how that works. Yeah, like that. I think it's cool, it works, it's grimy, it's nasty, it's dirty, but it also sort of mimics that black tuft of tail feathers from an ibis. Time for a little bit of rust, because like I said, these are tools, like a lawnmower or a tractor, and if it gets a little bit of rust but it's still working, then nobody's going to replace whatever is rusting. So I've got some rust streaks, and especially in the bullet holes and the other damage that's on the armor, I'm going to add a little bit of this, and I'm going to streak it out, make it look like it's been there for a while. There, some nice rust streaks. And again, it's this whole idea of a Thousand Sons Aspiring Sorcerer, or Exalted Sorcerer, or whatever sorcerer, being responsible for his tools, but just not caring that much about the state they are in. I mean, armor gets a little bit of a knock, yeah, but it's still working, and it starts to rust, but who cares? Same with these exhausts on the backpack. As long as the backpack is doing its job, why would you bother replacing these exhausts on a couple of automatons? Time for my icon, or my 3 ravens that are sitting up here. Now, I already hit them a little bit with the same grayish blue that I used on the black armor, but I want to add a little bit more color. So I'm going to add a little bit of Naggaroth Knife, a bit of Sybarite green, back to the blue-gray, and then I dry brush a bit of black. And that will give me some kind of magic looking ravens here on top of that icon. Now these regular Rubrics, they aren't done yet because, you know, I got those feathers to go and these gold bits that are attached to the armor with, they might become gems, the eyes, there's little bits of pieces I still need to do. But I want to work on the sorcerer first because I'll use colors on him that are not on the models right now, and I might want to reuse those onto the regular Rubrics. Because this guy, the Exalted Sorcerer, no, not the Exalted, the Aspiring Sorcerer, he's going to look in the same way that the ancient Egyptians used to depict Thoth. So I really like this depiction of Thoth, where it has this blue headdress and a sort of green bird face, and I want to recreate that on this guy. So I kept the head separate, of course, so I can easily work with him, and then I can make the shoulder pads and the backpack sort of bright blue. And I also want to make him look really gaudy. I don't want a muted, sort of stylish, classic, beautiful paint scheme on my sorcerers. No, I want them to look gaudy. I want them to look over the top, like tacky, nasty, self-centered, narcissistic maniacs that they are. So I'll do a bit of a Jade paint scheme on this head, starting with some bright mood green, stipple on some Sybarite green, add a green wash. In this case I'm using Hex Wraith Flame, but you could also use something like, what's it called? Contrast Warp Lightning, something like that, as long as it's green and it's bright. And then I stipple on some Waystone green. This is the glossy technical paint that's green, good for gemstones and so on, so I'll make this look like it's a bit of a jade mask, a jade helmet. There, like that. It needs to dry and you'll see the effect much better, but I'm just going to do the shoulder pads and the backpack the same way, but then with different paints. So first some Teclis blue, stipple on some Baharat blue, contrast Frostheart, and finally some Soulstone blue. Alright, that's a good start. It's already quite bright and kind of tacky, but I'm gonna push it a little bit more with a bunch of gold, starting with some Retributor armor. And I did a few more steps. So there's gold now on him, and I used the standard paint scheme of Retributor armor, some Reichland Flesh Shade, and then I dry brushed with some lighter Auric armor gold, so you get a nice gold effect. I used the same grime on his cloak, but much less than on the regular Rubrics. You know, they look really dirty and nasty, but I guess the sorcerer occasionally has people wash his clothes. Not for the Rubrics, but for himself. Now the rest is all the same, but I also think I should just push things a little bit further. See, this looks pretty good. I quite like this paint scheme, and I could do a Thousand Sons army like this, but that's not really what I'm trying to do. I want to make him look like Thoth, and I want to make him look like he's overdone, like he just took everything too far. He's self-centered, he wants to look the best of the best, and so I'm just going to commit to the whole Thoth paint scheme, who usually painted with sort of ochre red skin. So let's just paint his armor that same ochre red. Yeah, there we go. This is a nice sort of terracotta color. I did the Bugman's Glow and then some washes, some Berserker Blood Shade and Agrax Earth Shade, and then the same grime, and that gives it this nice sort of terracotta, warm, dark brown reddish color. And I really like it. I think the paint scheme is worse. I think the white armor was better because it looks a little bit more stylish and a little bit more coherent. This is more gaudy, but this is what I wanted. I want this sort of walking hieroglyph, this Egyptian god. Maybe he actually visited the Egyptians and now they started making depictions of him. That's how, those depictions of Thoth started. He's not modeled after Thoth. Thoth is modeled after him. That's how the story could be told. Now, there's a few more things left to do. Main thing is, of course, the plumes on these guys. And it just hit me. I should just paint them black, like the tail feathers of the sacred African Ibis, because they kind of stick out of his butt anyway. So let's just paint them a sort of bluish black. Yeah, that worked out pretty well. Those black plumes, they really finish the whole Ibis look, and they really stick to that Ibis theme that I want, and that's something I have to remind myself of often enough when I'm kit bashing. If there's a theme, if there's really something I want to show or sort of display, then just push it as far as much as you can. And the same goes for this guy. I feel like he's not shiny and blingy and over the top enough yet. So I'm going to add a bunch of these technical paints to just give him gems on his armor. Some red rubies here on the shoulder pads and the backpack and the helmet, because that will contrast nicely with the green and the blue. And some green and blues on the staff, because that's just a copy of his own headdress, the greens and blues of the Thoth depictions. Yeah, that looks prohibitively expensive and highly impractical. Exactly the way I imagine my Thousand Sons sorcerers to be. You just know that this thing over here, whether it's gems or glass or anything else, it's just going to shatter at the first contact with an enemy, or if he just puts the staff down a little too hard. And then after combat, of course, he has it replaced perfectly, and he's going to spend a fortune every time he goes into battle. And that's how I imagine Thousand Sons sorcerers to be. Now, there's one thing left to do, and that's to paint the magic effect. This little bird that's supposed to be sort of coming out of his hand that he is summoning up into the sky. And I'm gonna paint this magic effect blue, because I was looking at the Winds of Magic from Warhammer, because I want to stick to that as well with my Thousand Sons. And the Wind of Azir, the Wind of the Heavens, that's the blue one, and I think that one makes the most sense for a bird-themed spell. There, that looks pretty good already. I just used my Fluor paints that I also used on my Thousand Sons Demon Prince, and then dry brushed some blacks and some dark blues on the edges to make it look like the power is coming from inside the bird. But I also added a couple more 0.5mm wires here, so just to give that sort of idea of crackling power and electricity. And everywhere where these wires meet, either the armor or the hand or the bird, I put some more white to make it look like that's where the power concentrates. And now I'm just going to use a little bit of the Contrast Frostheart, the blue one, that's great for plasma effects and so on, to give this a little bit of a blue glow, but not too much. I still want to keep some of that white, especially where it touches the bird, to kind of show that concentration of power. And then it's time for the base, and the bird squad is done. I really like making Thoth the Ibis god. I think he fits the Thousand Sons very well, of course, but I also like how he's sort of leaning back and not casting a massive aggressive fireball or something like that. Just summoning up this bird, kind of setting it free. Maybe it's a familiar, maybe it's like a scouting unit that's going to do some work for him. Who knows? Maybe it's to send a message to some other sorcerer. I also quite like the rubrics that go with him, the Sacred Ibis. I know it's a bit of a weird paint scheme for Thousand Sons, but I think it works. It fits the theme, and together with Thoth the Ibis god, I think they fit really well. Now, if you enjoyed this, you should join the Discord. We've got a nice little community over there showing off kit bashes, helping each other out, and massive thanks to my patrons and channel members for supporting the channel. You guys rock!